Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to this evening's town hall meeting. And thank you all so much for being here tonight. Your presence shows your commitment to making the city of Atlanta a stronger city, a better city. Our city needs people like you who care and who make the time to get involved, and I know how busy you all are. I also appreciate all of the elected officials, especially members of the Atlanta City Council who are here tonight. Tonight's event is very important to me. My purpose in hosting this town hall meeting is to give you, the residents, the business owners, and community leaders of Atlanta, an opportunity to see, hear, and evaluate the 3 finalists I'm considering for the position of police chief for our city. When I ran for mayor, I committed to make public safety my #1 priority. Since taking office 5 months ago, I have built my administration around my commitment to attack crime in our city. The next chief of police in Atlanta will be my primary partner in making good on my promise to make Atlanta safer. I also believe that a key role for the next chief will be mending the bridge between the Atlanta Police Department and our communities and neighborhoods that make up our city. I know that many of you believe that there has been a breach of confidence between the Atlanta Police Department, in some instances, and some of our residents and communities. Tonight, we will begin the process of repairing that breach. While there have been challenges and disappointments, I also know there are examples of when the city's sworn officers have done extraordinary things, and they do so on almost a daily basis. When our women and men in blue have stood shoulder to shoulder with you, the people of Atlanta, and made a positive difference in neighborhoods and in lives of individuals, sometimes at a high personal cost. Just this weekend, I visited an officer at Grady Hospital who was shot in the line of duty. Officer Keith Roach was off duty, but still in uniform, when he saw an altercation where someone was about to rob some other citizens. He tried to help, but ran into real difficulty. Several witnesses came to his aid, but not before he was shot, more than once. His bulletproof vest and the concern of bystanders probably helped to save his life. I tell you this because my goal as mayor is to hear more stories about the heroism and good deeds of our police officers and put to an end the controversies which destroy trust and make us less safe as a community. I know that can only happen if the Atlanta Police Department is working well with you, the citizens and the communities and neighborhoods in Atlanta, and if the Atlanta Police Department Chief Commander has earned your respect and your trust. Shortly, they'll be sitting here, in fact, they're over there, on this stage, are 3 men who've dedicated their careers to law enforcement. Each one brings a unique set of skills and perspectives to the table, and each one believes he is the right person to lead the Atlanta Police Department right now. Each was well vetted by an executive search firm, Russell Reynolds, led by Rich Perkey, and an extraordinary search committee appointed by me that was led by Georgia State University Police Chief Connie Sampson. Each candidate has been interviewed by me and by Peter Amon, the city's chief operating officer. And earlier today, members of the Citizen Review Board and its executive director had the opportunity to sit down personally and meet the candidates as well. Now, under the current charter of the City of Atlanta, the mayor has the right to unilaterally appoint the police chief. But I committed to an open process, and I'm confident that that was the right decision for our city. I want to thank the distinguished members of the most diverse and inclusive search committee this city has ever set forth. Thank you, Chief Sampson. I also want to thank Peter Amon and my good friends Lisa Borders and Lawrence Ash for the tremendous work they have done in evaluating the candidates. It was a tall order, and I appreciate their time and their insights, which I'm taking into full consideration. I also appreciate that we're very close to completing this task within 120 days from the date of announcement. Tonight, I will be watching this town hall meeting as carefully as you are to help me make my decision about who should lead the Atlanta Police Department. This community event and your participation in this meeting are very real and very valuable to me. So now it's time for us to begin. I know the candidates want to get to know you, and I know that you want to get to know them. To help us get the most out of our limited time together, I've asked my two good friends, Deidra Dukes, reporter and weekend anchor for Fox News, and Bill Nigut, the Southeast Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League and an outstanding former WSB reporter, to guide this evening's program. They're going to tell you a little bit more about what to expect over the next 90 minutes. But before I go on, I do want to take a moment to say that I hope this evening is a positive learning experience for us all. I wish the candidates well and hope that we will put our best faces forward for our guests. Let's treat them with courtesy and the dignity that they deserve and ask questions related to their qualifications that help us assess what's best for this city. Let's not delve into ridicule or personal attacks. Remember, this isn't easy. I've never had an interview in front of hundreds of people, and I don't think that many of you have either. So this is pretty tough. But let's be thoughtful tonight. And let's leave here with a better understanding of the candidates who may lead our city's police department through a candid but respectful discussion. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your very busy lives, very busy schedules to be here tonight. Deidra, Bill, welcome and come on out. Thank you, everybody.
Good evening. We're really glad to see everybody, aren't we, Deidra?
We certainly are. It's a nice turnout this evening on a busy Thursday night. I know there were so many other places that people could be, and we really appreciate the fact that you all are here this evening. I think it shows all three candidates just how seriously we here in Atlanta take this issue of crime.
And to our three candidates, welcome to Atlanta again. I know you've been here before, and we appreciate your participation in this unique event. Excuse me. I want to set some ground rules for tonight, but first, I really think we have to thank Mayor Reed. This is a remarkable program tonight. You know as well as I that in the past in Atlanta, as in most cities around the country, the hiring of for a major position like this is done privately, behind closed doors, maybe not with the intention of excluding the public, but to open this process up so you as citizens of Atlanta can watch the candidates, listen to them, and ask a few questions is remarkable. And I think we owe Mayor Reed a real debt of gratitude for doing that. So that said, a couple of standard house rules. Please make sure your cell phones are on silent mode. And just to let you know, the way we're going to proceed is that in a moment, Deidra's going to introduce each of the candidates to you. They'll each have 3 minutes apiece, and we're going to try to gently enforce a time limit. And then we'll ask each of us a series of questions. We have a couple of email questions that came into the city, and then we're coming down to you. And you will have a chance to ask your questions of the candidates. When we get to the audience questions, I do want to remind you of what Mayor Reed said. This is an opportunity to hear from the candidates, not speeches from the audience. We know you have a lot to say or you wouldn't be here tonight, but we're going to ask that you use the time to ask questions of them and respectfully listen to their answers. So thanks again for being here. It's all yours, Deidra.
All right, on that note, I know you are all very excited and eager to have your opportunity to hear from these candidates and to ask your own questions, so let's move forward. Our candidates this evening are in alphabetical order. Dr. Cedric Alexander, Director of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Transportation Security Administration at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Police Chief George Turner, Interim Police Chief of Atlanta Police Department. And Police Chief Robert Crump White, Chief of the Louisville, Kentucky Metro Police Department. And we're going to begin also in alphabetical order, at least for this portion of our program. and allow you, Director Alexander, to begin with your opening statements.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, City of Atlanta, for inviting me here tonight as well, too. I think it's very important for me to say at the onset of this event is that this community is a world-class international community and has been recognized as such for a very, very, very long time. I acknowledge that, I welcome that, and it's certainly for you, being residents of this community, is something I'm well aware that you're very, very proud of and you've worked very hard at over the last number of years to be where you are today. My career, just a little bit about myself. My career started in 1977. I spent 15 years initially in law enforcement, 12 of those years with Metro-Dade Police Department on the ground, doing the work that the men and women in your community do every day. After 15 years of doing that, for me, it was just not enough. I needed to do something that could help the profession. I saw men and women inside the police department where I worked in Florida. I saw them work hard. I saw them cry. I saw them sweat. I saw some die on the streets of the city. And some of those memories are still with me to this day. So it became incumbent upon me to do something different to help the profession, to move beyond the 15 years of just being a street cop, but learning how we work inside organizations and, and to further understand how organizations affect us as men and women of uniform. I left the department in 1992 after 15 years of service. Went back to school, became a social scientist, and in 2002 had the unique opportunity to be invited back into law enforcement in Rochester, New York. It was during that time that former Mayor Bill Johnson invited me to come back and help him work on some of the same issues that you all are here to discuss tonight. Issues with police-community relations, issues with crime, issues with lack of technology, issues with leadership that we all have to be concerned about each and every day. During that time, I accepted that position as deputy chief inside that organization and subsequently became chief. We noted some real significant changes around technology. I developed programs that police officers that would be useful to them in dealing with people with mental health issues so that they could better serve the community and reduce the risk of injury when working with populations who are troubled. And it worked well for us, and I can go on and name a number of things that we did to make changes within that organization and to put community trust back in place. We had several in-custody police deaths, but investigations revealed they were at no fault of the police officers, but the separation and the resentment and the anger that it caused are some of the same feelings that I know that still agitate this community.
Just take a couple more seconds to...
During that time, we allowed ourselves to fix a lot of those wrongs. I left there, went on to the state, being invited into state government by the governor at that time, where I worked as deputy commissioner of criminal justice, and from there to where I am today, serving this nation in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. I've had a depth and breadth of law enforcement experience and public safety, and I bring that to this city. It has been different, it has been varied, but it has been very unique, but it has been one wonderful career which I would not change, and I hope that I can bring all those skill sets and all those talents to this city and be your next chief. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander.
Chief Turner.
I also would like to thank Mayor Reed for his leadership around this decision. Also, I'd like to take a few minutes to thank the men and women of the Atlanta Police Department, our partners in law enforcement, both state, federal, and local, all of our businesses and citizens for the support that they've shown me for the last 5 months. I also like to thank Bill, you, and Deidra for taking the lead in doing this for us. You know, who am I? I'm a native of this city. I grew up in public housing. The first 9 years of my life I spent in public housing. My folk were fortunate enough to purchase a house in Southwest Atlanta in 1968. I graduated on this very stage from D.M. Thurl High School in 1977. You know, this is my home. I was fortunate enough to marry a woman from Marietta, Kathy, 29 years ago, and we are now still married, 4 children, and we're proud of those children and 2 grandchildren. I also came on the Atlanta Police Department in 1981. And at that time, I had the opportunity to start my career in Zone 5 in the downtown community. An opportunity to meet people that came into the city that had a desire to be here. And I hope I made a difference during that time as an officer. I spent the majority of my career, in the first part of that, as a detective. Fortunate enough to work in some of the in great cases in intelligence, and I started our gang unit as a sergeant. Gangs and also family violence was a very significant part of my career and what happened in the city of Atlanta. I spent the last few years working as the Deputy Chief of Support Service Division, dealing with the challenges around our budget, around 911, standing up a new center in April of last year, taking all of the ridicules around the challenges of standing that new center up. I'm proud today to say that we are now answering all our calls within 10 seconds, which is 90% of the time, and we're proud of the success that we're having, and we're moving forward to get even better. I had the opportunity to work along our budget process in the previous 2 years as we was forced to make some very hard and difficult decisions around our policing environment. We had to look at other opportunities and how we were able to be more successful and look at it for other opportunities. We sought various different grants. We were successful in receiving a community-oriented policing grant, which allowed us to have 50 new officers to be added to our force. Those officers are now hired and they're in our police academy. We will be standing up a community-oriented policing section that will allow us to have better relationships and collaborative partnerships with the community. Since I've been in this role, I've talked to more than 75 citizens, groups, business meetings, and various different citizens. And what I've determined from those talks, our citizens, they are looking for a police officer that has integrity, that's professional, and that is accountable to our citizens.
Take just a few more seconds, please, Steve.
Thank you. And I just appreciate this opportunity that the mayor has given me to serve in this role, and I look forward to serving further. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief White, your remarks, please.
Thank you, and good evening. I also want to thank the mayor for this wonderful opportunity. I have been blessed to be a police officer my entire adult life. Actually, I started at the age of 18 as a police cadet in Washington, D.C., and I retired there after 23 years as a commander, and then I was hired to start a police department of public housing in Washington, D.C. At that time was taken from the city into receivership because of the crime and some of the other issues. And the main purpose I was hired was to deal with that crime, was specifically targeted around gangs. As a result of the initiatives, the men and women of the public housing police undertook, we decreased crime 30%. Not only did we decrease crime 30%, but we dealt with the perception of crime. You know, when I think of crime and when I talk to citizens and we deal with crime, we're dealing with the actual crime numbers. And many of us as police chiefs will talk about the tremendous decreases we've had as it relates to crime. But equally as important is dealing with that perception of crime, because if we say that it's not occurring and you feel that it is occurring, we have a problem. So when you're dealing with crime, you have to deal with the numbers as well as the perception. Being in public housing for 2 years, I was asked to return to the city police department to institute some of the initiatives that we did in public housing and help address some of the issues that were pervasive in the D.C. Police Department. I did that for an additional 6 months, eventually retired as an assistant chief. From there, I became the chief in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I think the main reason the city manager at that time hired me was to deal with the culture. It was a culture where officers were afraid to make decisions. Everything was made from the top down. It was a culture that was disconnected with the community, and it was an us versus them mentality. I think we were very successful over the 4.5 years that I was there. We changed the culture, we decentralized the police department, and from there I had the opportunity to be hired to merge the Louisville Metro Police Department. The city police department and county police department merged to become one department. A lot of issues as it relates to that prior to merger and during that process. But when it was all said and done, and even though I was fortunate enough to work in 4 departments and 3 as a police chief, there are some, and while there are some very different things, there are a lot of similarities that I think that are important. And those similarities are one of the reasons why I am in awe with the attendance here tonight, because I will tell you that if, in fact, we're going to prevent crime, and I think that's what we get paid to do, to prevent crime for the long run, it is not just the men and women in the police department or the government is going to do that, or the government that is going to do that. It is going to require a collaborative effort from the community and the police working together. So that little thin blue line that police officers that we ought to talk about, we really need to erase that. We need to understand that the police department is not the police department, it is the community's police department. Until we as a department understand that you are the customers and you should have some input and decision-making on how we police and how we address the issues that are relevant to you, we will continue to kind of chase our tail. So I want to applaud you for being here tonight, because it is certainly a significant message to me that you care about your department, and you care about your community, and you care about your safety, and also encourage you to encourage others to get involved, because the long-term answer for crime is that collaborative relationship.
Take just a few more seconds, please.
Thank you very much, and I'm hoping that I'm blessed enough to have the opportunity to be your chief and to continue to talk about what we're doing and to continue to work together for the good of this community and for the prevention of crime.
All of the questions that we asked this evening and also the questions that you asked will be directed to all of the candidates. We felt in the interest of fairness, because we of course want to know what they think on all of the issues that you all raised this evening and that we raised. And so the first question that we have for you is, and you all can just kind of weigh in, what's the first action you would take as the city's new police chief? And during the first year, at the end of the first year, what major change would you like to see as a result of your efforts here? And you all can jump in.
I'll go first.
Take it first, sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what's really significant, and let me quote something. The local newspaper described me as an outsider, so I'll use that term. I'll be the outside man tonight. And one thing that's critically important anytime you come into an organization is that you must make an assessment of that organization. Atlanta Police Department, from the outside looking in, is a very, very good police department. Very good police department. But one thing that would be critical for me, and I've done this in organizations that I've led as well too, is to be able to come into that organization, make an assessment of that organization based on my own observations and skills and experiences as what we need to do in order to move forward. Secondly, once you do that, we need to establish a relationship. For me, establishing that relationship with the men and women inside. If I'm your chief, I'm going to be your chief. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to be visible. I'm going to be on the streets with you when time permits for me to do that, and I will make time, because I think it's critically important that anyone who leads, you have to be able to lead from the front of the organization and not just talk about it. Because I'm not talking about what I'm going to do. I'm talking about what has already been demonstrated. So I need to establish a relationship with the men and women inside this organization. I need to hear them. They need to feel me. I need to feel how they're feeling about what they do with what they have to work with. I have to establish relationships at the end of the year with the community. A community that sometimes feels disenfranchised from its police department. A community that wants to have a relationship with its police department, and a community that wants to be supportive. And the police department needs that. None of us are going to deal with the issues around crime, around public safety, around quality of life, unless we do it together. But we have to establish a community of trust. That takes time. There has been damage that has been done, but it can be repaired. But what it takes is someone who can lead an organization, be honest with an organization, be honest with the men and women inside that organization, and be honest with the community, and make sure that what we do is transparent.
I don't mean to interrupt you, except I failed to say to you that in the question and answer we're going to ask you to try to do about 2 minutes, because we want to give everybody a chance and ask a lot of questions. So
is that 2 minutes?
Yeah, that's a little bit more. Okay.
All right, that's my 2 minutes.
Thank you very much.
And you answered the question very effectively. Thank you.
All right.
I'll take the next chance, Deidra. Just two things. I have an advantage over these two gentlemen. I've been doing this job for the last 5 months. I've gone into the communities. I've talked to our officers. I have a relationship with citizens here in this city. And I think we're doing a great job. We're building a new relationship with communities throughout the entire community, from Bankhead to Buckhead. And I know that's a cliche, but I've been there. I've had those conversations with those citizens. I tell you, it's not a day that go by that I don't talk to an officer that say that we are doing great things and we have the potential to be a great police department. It's because of the leadership that we put in place. The mayor allowed us to move significantly on the first days of this administration to put a team in place that made sense. It put the right people in the right place. We've had a successful turnaround in our crime. We've built better relationships with communities, and we're not finished. We have an opportunity to continue. What I want to have done before the end of the year, we have to stand up that community-oriented policing section that I continue to talk about. That will give us a tremendous opportunity to reach out to the community and build those partnerships. And then also, we've got to move our technology forward. We've got to be able to move to a better surveillance process that we have in our city. We're not fortunate enough to receive some wireless broadband grants that we applied for. We're in the process of applying for a second phase. Even if we don't do that, through the development of the Atlanta Police Foundation and some other partners, we are going to move forward and provide the surveillance systems that is necessary to reduce crime in our city. Anytime that we've seen cameras, such as surveillance systems that are operating in Chicago and some of the other larger cities, crime is down 15 to 20% in those areas because people are simply not going to commit crimes when they know that they are being photographed in that crime. So, and also the detection of crime. So it's important that we move our technology forward and stand that community-oriented policing section up.
That's just about 2 minutes, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I would certainly spend my first 90 days, first maybe even 120 days, spending an inordinate amount of time listening to people inside the police department and outside the police department, asking the officers as well as the community, what do you like about the department? What don't you like about the department? What suggestions do you have as it relates to what do you think that we need to go as a police department? Obviously, doing this some 30-odd years, philosophically, I certainly have my beliefs in how organizations, specifically police organizations, should be run. But I think it's important to get input from everyone who's willing to weigh in on their thoughts and their feelings about our police department. I think what's really important is we all need to understand that it's our police department. It's not the APD and the 1,550 members, sworn members, their police department. It's a community police department. So, you know, I think any success that I've been part of has really been the result of a collaborative relationship. So I would, from day one, I would start with that attitude. And I also have to say this, community policing, from my perspective, is a philosophy. It's something that has to be ingrained in every member on the police department. And they have to understand the approach behind that. It's not a program, it really has to be a philosophy. So it doesn't really matter if you're sitting behind the desk, which I'm hoping there's not many of them doing that, because I do believe if you're wearing a gun and badge, you should be out on the street. Or if you're a detective, or if you're one of these officers in one of the zones, they all should understand that the approach and the philosophy behind our department in an effort to prevent that crime is community policing.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I think many people believe that one way you lower crime rates, fight crime, is by having a large enough police force to do that. The Atlanta Police Department has some 1,750, I believe, people. And there are a lot of folks who think that's not enough. I heard Mayor Reed throughout the campaign say he thinks we need more police officers on the street. And he's got budget issues that will create problems in doing that. But it's not just about hiring new officers, it's about retention. Atlanta has a higher rate of loss than the national average. I think nationally there's about a 5% loss annually in police forces across the country. Atlanta's is some 9.5%. So my question to you is, first of all, is it true we need more police officers on the street? Will that help? And second, once you get them there, why can't we retain them? What are we doing wrong, and what do we have to change?
Yes, we need more police officers. And I think that Mayor Reed and his administration has expressed that very clearly in this budget. What we have to do to retain those officers, I tell you, these are the numbers. We've hired more than 130 police officers, police recruits this year alone. We continue to retool the bank. And what happens with that, we have 171 recruits at different levels of training at this moment. None of those 171 recruits can provide a service on the streets for us at this time. What we've got to do is be able to retain our officers at a higher clip. Your numbers are absolutely right, Bill. We lose officers at a 10% clip here in the city of Atlanta. We've got to restore our steps. We've got to have a more sustainable step program and also a career ladder that make us more attractive. We are very attractive on the front side of our, as we attract officers into the police department. The problem is that there's no way to get to the top of that pay scale. When you look at various different cities around the metro Atlanta area, that's not the case. You look at cities of our size, that's not the case. You'll find where an officer will come in our police department that will make between $39,000 and $41,000. And we tell that officer that he can peak out at about $58,000, but there's simply not a way to get to the top of that scale. We lose officers between 2 and 5 years in a very critical time when that officer has now learned how to be a police officer and can be effective on the streets. We've got to turn that pattern around.
With the 10 seconds you have left, is it just pay, or are there other issues that lend itself to that high rate of departure? Very quickly.
When we look at the exit interviews from officers, pay is the #1 issue, but equipment is some of the challenges as well around technology.
Thank you. Gentlemen?
I will, and obviously Chief Turner has an advantage as relates to here, but I will tell you that I work in a city that has approximately 700,000 residents, and we have under 1,300 police officers. And I will also tell you that there is not a police chief in America that will not tell you that they want more police officers. But the reality of that is that depending on where you work, in every department I've worked in, there's always been budgetary issues. It just doesn't happen with the frequency and the numbers that we all agreed that we probably need to have. So what you had to do is, recruiting is tough. There is no doubt about it. We have a very low turnover rate in our department, and we are not the highest paid. We're certainly the largest in the state. But what I think attracts officers to our department and what I think keeps them there is the pride that the men and women have in the department. I mean, we are, in the eyes of the state of Kentucky and all the other law enforcement agencies in that region, and there are a lot, Indianapolis, Nashville, St. Louis, we are a flagship agency, and members are proud to be that. And part of that is obviously pay is always an issue, but I think the officers feel relatively respected. It's a union that has collective bargaining, so there are always issues with management union as it relates to that. They have equipment. We use multipliers, technology. If it doesn't require a gun and badge, we hire civilians to do things that police officers are traditionally doing.
Chief, I would take as many men and women as I can onto the organization so that we can provide the service on the street that is needed to keep this community safe. But let me say this. People don't leave their jobs just because of money. If we think about it for a moment, most officers, the most they will make is maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 more a year. And I've seen this. I'm talking about what I know. I'm talking about from my own experience in other organizations I have been in. Whether it's a 2%, 3%, 4% raise, we want to pay our police officers as much as we can for the work that they do, because they do an incredible job that most of us in this room don't want to do. And we can never pay them enough in terms of what they have to do in order to protect us and keep our communities safe. But it's just not money, because oftentimes people leave organizations, whether it's police, whether it's private industry, or whether it's education, wherever. People leave because they don't feel valued. People leave because they feel minimized, they feel marginalized, They feel that no one cares about them, and they leave for lack of leadership in organizations. That's why people leave organizations, whether it be police, whether it be industry, whether it be commerce, it doesn't matter. When people join an organization, even like Atlanta Police Department, and I would venture to say this, the men and women join because they want to be members of Atlanta Police Department, not Fulton County, not Riverdale, not Gwinnett County.
Finish up, please.
But Atlanta police officers. And that's where their hearts are. I put money on the table, that's where their hearts are. But people want to feel valued at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, the next question is in regards to the Citizen Review Board. City council members, Atlanta City Council members, recently voted to subpoena 4 Atlanta police officers who refused to appear before the Citizen Review Board over the use of excessive force. We'd like to know your views on citizen review boards, if you support them, why or why not, and any personal experience you have with citizen review boards.
I'll go first on this. Maybe I shouldn't go first on this one, but I have worked in agencies with civilian review boards similar to the one that is here, into how this one appears to be unfolding, because I understand it's certainly a work in action. And I worked in agencies without boards, and I work with agencies that have a different version of a board. You know, my thoughts as an individual and a police chief is number one. There are police departments have more oversight than any other entity in government. First of all, as it relates to the Citizen Review Board, I normally do not lose a lot of sleep over that. Number one, because number one, I believe that we have to have a transparent police department. So it really doesn't matter who does what, who sees what you have. And if you're doing the right thing, the outcome's going to always be the same. So from that perspective, I don't lose a lot of heartburn over Citizens Review Board. Now, the only issue that I really have with the Citizen Review Board, if in fact is a board, and there are boards across this country, but not many of them, if they want to have some say, some final say as it relates to discipline. I believe that if you're responsible for a subordinate, very much like a parent, if I'm responsible for my children, and my children do something that requires some corrective action should be taken, their grandparents shouldn't be the ones to take that action. I should be the one as their parent to be in a position to take that action. So the only real heartburn I have with the Citizen Review Board is if in fact it's in a board, and if it's a board that has any final say as it relates to discipline. Other than that, I think that there needs to be some conversation, more conversation between the administration, the rank and file, and the board that's in place, so we can in fact find a happy medium where everyone will feel relatively comfortable.
Gentlemen?
Thanks, Chief Turner. I really had an opportunity today to meet your CRB here locally, and what I would characterize as a very rich conversation around their role and the challenges that they have here in the city of Atlanta. I think there is a place for CRBs, but what has to be established first and foremost is that there has to be trust between leadership inside the police department, and it has to be trust that's established with a CRB. And when that trust is established, we also have to come to terms and realize that there's going to be give and take on both sides. Because the CRB is not, or has not been appointed to serve itself, no more than the police department exists to serve itself. We're here to serve the community. So if we're in conflict or at odds with each other because of differences that we're having a hard time coming to terms with, the community loses. And the community should not be in a position to have to wait for two entities to come to some agreement. This is workable, but it's going to take trust, it's going to take patience, and I think what's critically important too is that both entities are going to have to step back and then reapproach each other again in an atmosphere that requires patience and understanding that the goal is for the community to feel trust within the police department. The men and women in this organization have to do an incredible job. And sometimes the job that they do is not perfect. They have to make decisions at times that none of us might want to make. And sometimes mistakes are made. And sometimes egregious acts happen as well too.
Take just a minute to finish.
But I think it's just important for a police leadership, whoever your next chief may be that's sitting at this table, is that they really have to provide the leadership to a CRB and to a community to find resolve around a very complex and very complicated and very convoluted issue that also has some law tied to it, that also has to be worked through as well.
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's all right.
This is a very sensitive issue for our community. The CRB was established at a very difficult time in our police department. It was established because the citizens simply just did not trust our police department. We've got issues as relates to that trust. We are working to build that back. We do that through the leadership of the police department, and I've been taking that lead to do that. I'll tell you, when we took over, as of May 26, we cleared 363 OPS files. And out of that OPS file, those 363 files, 200 of those had a back past 2009. We've since then moved forward with streamlining our process. Citizens need to be able to believe that they can make a complaint, that we can get through that complaint in a timely manner, and our officers deserve that as well. We are working to that, and we will be streamlining our process even greater, and I look forward to implementing those. But it's all about trust. The Citizen Review Board was put in place because of distrust with our police department. We have new leadership here in this police department, and everyone in the command staff is available to citizens to come forward in front of. I have been out there in the community. I will continue to be in the community to continue to build that trust. We've got to build the trust in the community again between the police department and the citizens.
Thank you all. I have a question that is simple but has a lot of convoluted implications. How do you balance, in these times especially, your force's ability to be tough on crime but sensitive to the concerns of various elements in the community? And I refer to, for instance, being able to deal with various constituent groups who feel that they are discriminated against. We had the Eagle Bar raid here, which the gay community believes was a slap in the face. Hispanics across Metro Atlanta are facing law enforcement agencies. Atlanta now does not happen to be one of them that are cooperating with federal government, and in some cases taking advantage of opportunities to deport people picked up for traffic stops. You have a variety of groups that believe the police are cracking down on them out of prejudice, and yet at the same time, Muslim groups concerned about how they're treated. So how do you balance, given all of that, your ability to be tough, keep this community safe, but be sensitive to the concerns of all of these groups?
Well, I'll start, Bill. Every chief of police responsibility is to reduce crime. No different anywhere in the country. And I tell you, with the resources that we have to make solid decisions as it relates to how we do that. I'll give you a prime example. We get a number of complaints about our Red Dog and how they may handle citizens. We have a three-tier process on how we deal with battle, and I mean battle, narcotic sales in our city. We have our Red Dog units are that street-level component of that three-tier process. Our Red Dog officers, as of today, have arrested more than 1,000 police people this year. And they've made those arrests in areas that are challenged with blight in our community, where people are being challenged to even live in their own homes. The areas that we're concerned about, of course, is the English Avenue area, McDaniel Glen, and some of those communities. I tell you, more than 35% of those citizens are individuals that are 65 years old. We have an obligation to protect them. There are so many houses that are in disrepair and vacant, and we have to have a resource to go in and deal with those issues. Now, I tell you, we have to be responsible to citizens. We have to treat people correctly. I talked to you about the 363 files that I cleared since the first of the year. Out of that, we've also fired 6 police officers. We fired them because they just simply did not have the integrity, the professionalism that we will stand for in our police department. We've got to make sure that we have a police officer that the citizens are pleased to have that police officer on the street doing the job that they are sworn to do.
Thank you, Chief.
I agree. That issue is just not an issue that's just relevant to Atlanta. It's a nationwide issue. And from my perspective, I think really it's a leadership issue. Like, people have to believe that there's an department that cares about its community, and it treats everybody, regardless of their station in life, everybody, whether you're robbing a bank or whether you're helping someone unlock their car in Burkhead. Both of those individuals have to be treated with the exact same dignity and respect. And until the community believes that everyone is being treated the same, you're going to continue to have these problems. The flip side of that is they have to believe that it's a police department that holds its officers accountable. And you've heard all of us say the important job that police officers do and the situations that they're dealt with every single day, and they're forced to make split-second decisions that if we can sit at the table and analyze and criticize, that they don't have the opportunity to do that. But the bottom line to that is we have to have a department where the community sees that it is a department where all of us are held accountable. The citizens that are out there doing improper things are held equally as accountable as the men and women of the police department. And what I have learned, there are 2 things that I think that have contributed to this misunderstanding of police. Number 1 is our inability to address bad behavior has become an acceptable practice in police departments across the country. And that's why it's so important that you hold, and I'm not saying you fire people and you give them days off, but it's so important that you address that behavior early on, because it can manifest itself to something that is that ends up causing the city money, causing a police officer to lose his job, and a disservice to the community. And the other thing that I think has happened is we train police officers across the country about the legality of the law. I can assure you there's not a police officer that's in an accredited police department that don't know what is right from wrong, and they go out there and do those things. But sometimes they make the decisions that in the mind of an everyday citizen, the necessity of that decision doesn't register with that legality.
Take just a minute.
So really what I'm advocating that we need to do and what we're attempting to do in the department I work in is not only just train them on the legality of the law, but have them make decisions that are necessary and that are reasonable. And I think once that occurs, when we do get into those controversial issues and the community sees that we're transparent and there is a level playing field, the healing process when those controversial things happen is a lot quicker.
Thank you, Chief.
I think there is I think it's important, and I'd rather not use the word tough on crime as opposed to saying I think we have to be very firm about crime. I'm very conservative when it comes to law and order in a community, particularly a community where people want to be safe, they want their children to be safe, they want their homes to be secured when they're away and no one is invading their privacy. And they don't feel a threat when they walk out onto the streets. Unfortunately, in many cities across America, that is not the case. So yes, we have to be very firm, we have to be very direct, and we have to enforce the law as it is. And I think each one of us up here that's sitting at this table would concur that we have to be very firm and we have to be very pointed about keeping people safe in our community. But as a police department, we also have a social responsibility. That means if we're going to be firm or tough on crime, we also have to be very professional about it. We have to be well trained. We have to make sure that the men and women who are enforcing the laws in your state have the ability to do it, the equipment to do it, and have the support to do it from their bosses and from their community. Because we should not have to wait for something to happen where our officers get hurt, they get maimed, and then we talk about how great they are. They are great all the time because they're doing jobs out there, oftentimes arresting bad people, being tough, being firm, and we don't know about it. But the important piece is for us, for all of us that are in this room and for all of us in this community, yes, we have to be very firm. We have to be very clear about the line that does not get crossed, and we have to be consistent. But it doesn't give police officers the right to mistreat people. and to degrade people. That's unacceptable. You don't want that in your department, and I'm quite sure Atlanta Police Department don't want it either.
Take just a second.
But we will always have those who will cross the line, and they are dealt with appropriately, as been described by my colleagues here at this table. But it's important that we be very firm, but we have to stand firm as a community when it comes to enforcing the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we open it up to the floor, we also have some questions that were submitted via email from people who didn't have a chance, couldn't make it out tonight. And so we're going to, we really have time just to read one of those questions and to ask our panel of candidates to answer this question before we do open it up to all of you. This comes from Sean Garcia. He is a Kirkwood resident. He says, to the candidates, drug dealers have set up shop right outside my home and blatantly deal in the middle of the street. My repeated calls and messages to the zone commander have gone unanswered. Calling 911 didn't work either. I watch this happen every day. These dealers have no fear of being caught. As chief, what will you do to make sure even the smallest concerns are addressed when citizens call for help?
Can I take that?
Sure.
I'm disappointed to hear that. In that we have been very responsive to citizens, and I would love to get that information from that citizen, find out exactly where that is. I'm disappointed in that, but I'll tell you, we've been very responsive. We've been accountable to citizens, and any opportunity that they provided information on what's going on in our city, we've responded to that. I'm again disappointed to hear that, but I'll tell you, we have an obligation to make sure that we adhere to the citizens and hear their concerns and act appropriately. And we will do that. And I'll love to get that email so that we can respond to it.
We'll get that to you.
And that is not unheard of. You know, when you have a department and you go to 1 million runs a year, and you're dealing with resources that are stretched thin, and unfortunately that happens in our department also. But what I think is really important is that we articulate, that we address the issue, and we articulate what we're doing and why we're doing it. You know, someone's staying at the corner selling drugs, or there's a house, which is probably the more classic example that they're selling drugs out of, and citizens make calls, and you process that. And unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, there's a due process as it relates to that. It's not as simple as going in, making an arrest, and there's no longer selling drugs there. Even though that happens time and time again, I think our responsibility as a police department is to certainly address that specific issue, and also articulate what we're doing and why we're doing it to the extent possible without compromising any investigation. And hopefully it becomes a better understanding of why there is a delay, if in fact there is a delay in handling those type of calls.
Well, you know, in response to that, those are the kind of complaints certainly I've heard over the years as chief in neighborhoods all across this country. And we as a police department just have to be relentless. We have to remain relentless in those communities. We have to continue to build relationships with people who live in those communities, because they're the ones that are living there watching the drug dealing going on in their communities every day. And in some communities, of course, maybe even here in Atlanta, oftentimes the problem is very pervasive and it's very widespread, and resources get spread it very, very thin, even when they do report these incidents. But I think what's critically important is coming inside an organization where you have these kind of complaints in a community that are consistent. It, for me, brings to bear that how do I walk in and assess an organization right where they are and make some determination as to how they have addressed these issues with the resources that they do have. And that is quite, I'm quite sure that if it's a pervasive problem with drugs being sold in communities, sold in neighborhoods across this community, it's going to take a lot of work on the part of police and community in order to address those problems. It's an age-old problem, and many of you in this room probably have called many times about drug dealing in your neighborhoods and not feeling that you had a quick enough response for the police. That is a problem that is a real problem across this country, but part of it is that we have to look more systemically as to why that is such a broad and pervasive problem in our community. because the drug selling is a symptom of something else much greater going on in our communities. And until we begin to analyze that and think about it and find new ways to address those in our communities, then we're going to find some resolve. Because sometimes you're just not going to ever have enough police and enough resources when you have such a pervasive drug problem. It's an indication of something else much larger going on in your community that we have to be able to address.
Thank you. It's your turn. Deidra and I are going to come out, and if you want to get our attention, just I see some hands already. I think, Deidra, you get the first.
I do, and we do want to say it would be wonderful if we could talk to everyone. As you can see, Bill and I, you know us from television. We love to talk, and we'd love to give you all the opportunity to ask questions, but we really, as they say in the news business, this is going to be a hard wrap. So at 7:30, not 7:35, excuse me, gentlemen, we are going to have to wrap this up. So we're going to ask that you be concise with your questions, please, so we can fit as many in as we can. Hello, ma'am. We're going to allow you to ask the first question. Your name, please?
I'm Mrs. Valina Henderson.
And your question, Ms. Henderson?
First thing, I would like to thank the mayor for having this event where the community can take part in. Do he know we are making history tonight? This is the first of my knowing us ever having any input in anybody that the city of Atlanta has hired in a position of this nature.
Yes, ma'am.
So, for the candidates, I would like to know, I know you don't know this is going on, but it's in every block in the city of Atlanta. What would you all do to prevent the police from going into different cafes and things and eating free?
Ms. Henderson, can you give me the address of those restaurants?
From Pittsburgh to Bankhead. When they on their meat, they come in and they sit down, they eat, they get up and they look. Oh, you can't hear me. When they on their beat, they come in, they sit down, they eat, and they go on. And then they might come back and stop at the next one and get them a soda, drink the soda, and go on. I have seen them sit in the one and stay all day long.
All right. Gentlemen, in this round, because you got a lot of people out here, I think the shorter your answers, the better in terms of this audience. So.
That's not acceptable.
Your response is yes, please.
That's just simply not acceptable for officers to eat free in that manner that you just described. Officers have they have the ability to take a break, but they shouldn't be eating free in every restaurant that they come into.
Anybody else want to take a credit? Y'all all right at that? Okay. Let me come over here.
I'm Dickie Casey Cameron. My question is to all of the candidates. First of all, congratulations to all of you. When you call 911 and the call is not really sent out like I had recently that happened to me, when I called and said my life was in jeopardy, was being threatened, and the dispatch told me that she didn't have her officers to send out. And then, you know, it really got me disgusted. And then also when you call them, it takes you like an hour, 45 minutes to get out to when a person's life is in jeopardy. Why is that, and what would you do to this?
Thanks for the question.
Well, I'll just give you the reality of that. We do have what we call blackout periods in the city, and that's why it's important that the mayor has moved forward to try to increase the number of police officers that we have on the street. Now, blackout is simply that we have calls in the pending that we do not have a unit to respond to. I'm disappointed to hear that it took an hour and a half to get to a life-threatening call. I'll have to do some investigation into that, but any life-threatening call, we will respond to that immediately and hold some additional calls that have less priority.
And I would have to say, if it's a 911 emergency phone call, I'm sure APD, like most police departments, prioritize calls. And if it's something of the nature that you're describing, I would probably find it totally unacceptable that it's occurring. The flip side of that is, I would also have to figure out what are we doing with the with the police officers that we have and how we're prioritizing what they do and what kind of assignments that they do, and to do everything I can internally to make sure that we are maximizing the officers and that they are in fact doing things that require somebody with a gun and badge to do versus doing those other things. So in an effort to get more resources out there so they can respond to those emergency type calls much more expeditiously.
Yeah, I mean, very simply, anytime you have a life-threatening call, from my experience in 911 centers, is that call would take precedent over any call, and I certainly don't understand why that was not the case in this particular incident. However, I think the other piece as well, too, is that there's a perception that still exists in this community that 911 has not been as responsive as it should be. So anytime you have any incident to occur, no matter how slight or how huge it may happen to be, it just continues to add into that perception. But of course, I do applaud Chief Turner in his efforts to correct those problems here in this community, because that's very, very important.
Thank you. We have a question from a young man here at the front.
Thank you. My name is Shareth Mekla, President of Village Defense. In my 13 years of living in Atlanta, about $23 million has gone into public funding in Vine City, English Avenue. About $142K went into grants. About $2.8 million went into a tax allocation district for capital improvement projects. Federally funded Title 20 empowerment zones allocated about $5.8 million in the area. During the weed and seed audits, there were about $4 to $5 million that went into funding in Vine City, English Avenue in 2008 alone. Some other quick statistics: 39% of all violent crimes in Vine City and English Avenue happen around the intersection. Okay. The question is, we know that a lot of money has been poured into English Ave, Vine City. Okay. My question is, only 15% of the homes in that area are owner occupied. My question is, if 85% of the owners are ghosts, right? We talk about the symptoms. Who will take ownership of finding those 85%?
Actually, that's a code enforcement issue. I'm sorry?
He's saying in relation to crime.
Oh, as it relates to crime, it is an Atlanta Police Department issue in that those homes are vacant and that they are allowing people that we do not want to have in those communities to dwell there. And so ultimately, that's why we have so many arrests in those communities by our Red Dog officers and various other narcotics units in that community, those communities.
And if I could get my 1 minute to go as relates to that, and that's that's a common theme in the community that I work in. And we all talk about community policing, and really what needs to happen is you need to have community government. That's an issue that runs the board for not just the police, but for code enforcement, for the fire department. So part of what we have to do is collaboratively work together, all the entities inside of government as well as the entities outside of government, work together for the purpose of dealing with those out-of-state landlords in those vacant homes. We become very aggressive in doing that. And it will probably also require some legislation or maybe some enhanced legislation to deal with that also.
Yeah, and I would concur with that. You really have to hold those absent landlords accountable. Because anytime a community starts to deteriorate, and that's the point I think you're getting at, it certainly do create an environment for crime, all types of crime, as you know, has been alluded to here. So, thank you for your question.
Thank you all. We have a question here.
Good evening. You've had a lot of questions related to how you will respond to crime that currently exists. My question is, what proactive measures will you take to try to get ahead of the crime?
That's an excellent question. I tell you, around the Mayor's Centers of Hope, I think we've got to make an impact on what happens with juveniles and young people in our city. What we're doing now in the Atlanta Police Department, we have 3 police athletic centers that's operating, of 120 kids at a camp each day, 80 at another location, and 43 at another location. We're also doing a Citizen Police Academy with Junior Citizens Police Academy with young people. We've got to engage young people more. We've got to reach out and partner with those entities in the community that are doing a positive job. The mission of the Atlanta Police Department first is to reduce crime and to improve the quality of life and partner with the communities. And that's the only way that we're going to be successful. We think that as we stand this community policing concept model up, it will allow us to partner more and drive to the systemic issues, and that is that less than 50% of our young black males finish high school in the city of Atlanta. We've got to be able to make a difference as police officers as well on that same front.
Again, I basically agree with George, and I will tell you that we are not going to arrest ourselves out of this situation. I would also tell you that I'm of the belief that the judicial system, you don't get locked up, go to jail, get rehabilitated, come back out and get a six-figure job. That's TV stuff. That doesn't happen. So we need to do everything that we can to keep young people from getting into that system. That is a team effort. That requires every entity in government as well as every entity outside of government, working with all of our partners, obviously working with our residents and those parents, working with the business community, and working with the other entities in government that have remotely any kind of oversight as it relates to the quality of life for the citizens in our community.
Yeah, and you know, several things that are critically important too is that we have to be able to understand causation, because there's reasons for why our young people are going astray, but we need to understand causation. We need to come up with new intervention techniques, such as the Center for Hope and others that we have to think about and be very creative about as well too. And in addition to that, and going to the heart of the question that this citizen just asked, is prevention, because that is the real key. No, you're absolutely right. We're not going to rest our way out of this. We already have overcrowded jails across this country in which we're already contemplating as to who should stay in and who should go out, because it's costing cities and counties and states an excessive amount of money. So we got to be smarter as we move into the 21st century in terms of understanding crime and do a much greater job at prevention. That is key. Thank you.
All right, your question, sir?
Reverend Stellmacher is my name. I'm a TV talk show host of Issues and Answers. I first would like to thank our mayor, Mayor Reed. You've done an excellent job since you've gotten in office, and I really do appreciate you, and I'm very proud of you being our mayor. Second of all, my question is, there's a lot of vacant properties where a lot of these problems are occurring. Would either one of you chiefs consider teaming up with the banks and the mortgage companies, giving a reduced rate for the police officers to move into these empty houses, and also allow the police car to come with them to sit in these dilapidated neighborhoods and get them a reduced price because of their pay?
Thanks for that great question.
Yes. Thank you, Reverend.
I'm ready to go. Your question, please keep it brief. A lot of people want to speak.
Yes, thank you. Following the tragic aftermath of the death of Miss Catherine Johnston, the Georgia Code was amended no-knock warrants to only be issued when an affidavit or testimony established probable cause that knocking and announcing would likely pose a significant and imminent danger to human life or imminent danger of evidence being destroyed. Based on your experience with no-knock warrants, what type of evidence would you instruct officers to obtain in order to demonstrate probable cause of significant imminent danger to human life or evidence destruction?
I would say as it relates to any incident involving a police officer in our jurisdiction, they have to submit a report. If they serve a warrant, no knock or otherwise, they submit a report as it relates to the particulars of how that warrant was served, why that warrant was served, and what was the outcome of that. And that report is reviewed all the way up to the chain to the point where it gets to my desk. As a matter of fact, I have a full-time attorney that reviews every last one of those reports as it relates to legality, and he is kind of like my personal snitch. He goes over the chain of command and reports anything that seems to be abnormal as it relates to that. And also, as it relates to the Reverend, part of one of the jobs I had was in public housing. One of the programs that we had was we offered free living for police officers who was willing to live in those public housing sites. And while we didn't exactly have a long list of officers waiting to do that, we did in fact attract a lot of young officers who were trying to save money to get their own homes. So that program actually does work.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, it does.
Anybody? All right.
We'll move on.
I think we have one more. Did you want to respond? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
I'm Kathy McCullough, and I'm the campaign director of A Future Not a Past, which is to stop the prostitution of children in Georgia. And we just did a research study which shows if there's 7,200 men a month buying sex from adolescent girls, I'd like to know what each one of you would do to start arresting the Johns.
Well, that's a great question. Thank you so much for that. I tell you, one of the things that we looked at, the number of vice cases. We've arrested more than 400 people for vice this year alone. And in that, we looked at the number of Johns that we're arresting. We're not taking the appropriate number of people out of the streets as Johns. But also, we looked at the number of juvenile young women that we are taking off the street for prostitution. Only 5. And what I mean by only 5, the trade of juvenile children for sale, for sex, is not on the streets. It's occurring on the internet, and what we're doing now is partner with the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, to partner with them on a grant to be able to be more effective on that cyberspace. We've got to move our investigative methods back into the internet so that we can be effective in dealing with that issue. We will continue to work with the vice piece. Young girls are just simply not walking the streets. What's happening, it's on the internet, and we are working to try to move and be more aggressive in our cyberspace.
And we actually have 2 full-time detectives, and that's all they do. They stay on the net and they do that. And I would tell you, in our past experience dealing with that and dealing with prostitution in general, it was a group of citizens that came up with the idea of every time an incident like that occurred, they got the tag number to that particular car where that person was going to be, and somehow they got the information of where that person lived, and they called that person's significant other, that person's spouse. And what we did as a police department, we started actually confiscating those cars. And you would be amazed the impact that had between calling their significant other and confiscating their car. It cut those numbers down tremendously.
I think that's getting tough on crime.
Yeah. You know, the other piece to it I won't want to forget about is what I would like to see is an enactment of some more legislature to get tougher on those Johns. I think that's critically important too. But here's the other piece. Those young women that you're talking about, we also got to get them the social services that they need in order to help them not to go back out and solicit themselves. And there's tons of community services, social services that are out there, but we have to really wrap them around with social services, put these young people back in contact, back in communities, back with family, back with someone that will give them the social supports that they need to keep them from being victims again.
Question here.
I will. My name is Jesse Williams, and I'm the president of the National Association for Justice and Equality. I have a question for all 3 of you, either yes or no. This question is about the Licensed Civilian Review Board. They were recently granted by an ordinance, by a city ordinance, the authority to bring policemen aboard and giving this organization and that board some teeth. I want to know from each one of you, will you obey the city ordinances of the city of Atlanta that we worked so hard to establish this license review board, and it's just now becoming operational with this ordinance? Would you obey the law in giving and requiring your officers to come before that board and do the things that the law requires?
I'll obey the law, yes.
As it relates to CRB, and I think we talked about that earlier, and I certainly would obey the law. But again, I think what we really need to do is, as the board continues to unfold into being what it's going to be, I think there needs to be ongoing conversation between the administration, the police department, and the board to make sure that there is a happy medium.
I mean, the basis of your question is yes or no. And yes, I will obey the law. Yes.
All right.
My name is Stephen Muhammad, and my question is relating to sort of dovetailing off what the gentleman just said in terms of community relations, and I think Bill Nigut hit on it earlier. When you're dealing with all elements of the community, he spoke about the Eagle Bar and the gay community, but my question is, as a Muslim, Nation of Islam Muslim, bean pie selling Muslim, stand on the corner with a final call Muslim, what is your relationship with the Muslims in your community, for you three chiefs? And what will your relationship be with Muslims? Because Minister Farrakhan will be speaking in this building February, the 26th of this month to 5,000 people. So we're part of the community. We want to help. What is your relationship with the Muslim community, and what will it be? Because we've always had great relationships with the chief of police in this city.
Your answer, gentlemen?
We'll continue that. Matter of fact, I have a meeting with the delegation on Monday.
My relationship currently where I am with the entire community, regardless of their faith, their race, is very balanced and very equal, and it would certainly continue that no matter wherever I am as a police chief.
And I would concur with that as well, too. I mean, you know, as I stated very early on at the onset of this, Atlanta is a very international and diverse community. And it's just not black and white diversity, it's just not gender diversity, it's the unseen diversity as well, too, that we all have here. And everyone has a right to be treated respectfully in this community, regardless of who they are.
We're really short on time, real quick.
My name's Kenneth Dean, and my question is this. We have talked about police who see open crime and nothing seems to get done about it. What would you do as a police chief to help your police departments get the people to come forward and testify in the legal process so that something can be done?
You know, I think as a police department, we have to create as many venues, opportunities as possible for the citizens to work with us. You know, being mindful that our total purpose is the prevention of crime. And to be effective at doing that, we have to count on, in this case, the 500,000 eyes and ears of the residents that live here and the 1 million+ residents that come in here every single day. And I think that can be most effectively accomplished by creating opportunities where citizens are willing to work with us. And citizens obviously are more willing to work with us if they believe us, if they trust us, and if we've established a relationship with them.
All right, we have a question up here. Ma'am, I know you've had your hand up patiently, and we just cannot, folks, in this time talk to everybody. We really would love to, but we can't talk to everyone, and we do have to try to get to the people who stayed seated and raised their hands. Those are the house rules that we set up. We're trying to help everyone out here.
I'm Vernell Thomas, and I'm chairperson of the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. And one of the things that we do is to try to work to improve relations with all entities in the city of Atlanta. My question is, I haven't heard about organized crime, because sometimes that drives the crime that we see in the city. How will your department work with organized crime units and other entities throughout the city to help eradicate crime in that area?
Well, our department is really on the forefront of that. I worked as an organized crime, intelligence organized crime investigator for years. And I tell you, we are partnering with our federal and also state partners on a number of task forces. We continue to work on those large-scale drug trades initiatives through our HIDA program, through DEA, various different entities that we work collectively with. We'll continue to do that. We have matter of fact, we was just recently given a briefing on the narcotics trade and where narcotics are coming into the metropolitan Atlanta area. So yeah, we will continue to work with our federal partners in that area, and we think that we're getting good, strong information from those partnerships.
And that is key too. Anytime you're working with organized crime, in fact, organized crime is also becoming much more sophisticated than what we've known in the past as well too. For an example, even in cyberspace. But it's having that relationship with our federal partners and with our community as well too, who are eyes and ears and see things and hear things that we can be alerted to. So I think in a very fundamental way, I think all of us would up here would agree with you. That's a very important piece, and it's something that we would continue to do as chiefs of police.
And just quickly, I agree with both of them, but in addition to that, I have to tell you that I sincerely believe crime occurs where there are opportunities. There wouldn't be, or the organized crime would be greatly diminished if we did not have the opportunities in the communities to persist that will actually continue to that crime. So I think what we have to do while we're dealing with that big picture organized crime, I think at a very local level, we've got to eliminate those opportunities, and that occurs at the grassroots level between those officers that are out there and the citizens that are living in those particular neighborhoods.
And I think that the mayor, I've just spoken with the mayor and his staff, and I think they're afraid that Bill and I are going to need police escorts to get out of here if we don't allow you all to ask more questions. They've been very gracious. It is about 7:30, but they have agreed to allow you all to ask a handful more questions, and then we really have to get out of here.
Thank you. Do we have one right here?
I wanted to follow up on what you mentioned, Chief Robert, about the perception of crime. Right now where we stand, we are no less than 2 blocks away from a swarm of no less than 50 to 100 crackheads at Peachtree and Pine. They are a nuisance to tourists. How will we get those folks off the street?
Well, number one, if in fact they are committing crimes, we have a responsibility to do that. And my charge would be to that commander that works that particular area to come up with some strategies and help them, if he can't come up with some strategies, to address that and to hold them accountable and see what kind of progress we're making as it relates to that.
Well, I'll take that. Well, clearly, that's a challenge that we have as relates to the homeless community. That center serves, I tell you, it serves more than 700 people each night, sleeps in that shelter. And it's a challenge for us in that when those people, when they allow those folk to leave at the end of the day or in the morning, they really are there in the streets, and we have to deal with it. We know that there's a challenge. Now, I'll tell you, the Gateway Center is a prime example to push people to that location, to try to get people services to make them whole. That's got to be our number one location that we push people to. That's a challenge. We cannot arrest people for being homeless. We will not. What we'll do is arrest people for violating the law. And we've done that. I tell you, we've made more than 2,000 arrests for people that are aggressively panhandling in the downtown area. And we'll continue to do that. We know that that will directly affect the bottom line, and that is making sure that the Atlanta City of Atlanta is economically strong, and that we can continue to drive our city to the better end.
And I think the other piece is important to understand in a very sensitive kind of way as well, too, that 80 to 90% of people in this community is across America that are homeless have a mental health condition. And these people oftentimes are very harmless. This community has been very sensitive to its homeless population, and I think we should continue to be sensitive to them. But I think what's also critically important, as opposed to being negative about them and their condition, I think it's important that we think about going forward, how do we provide services to them to help them move away from homelessness? And there are a number of police departments across the country, and in Europe as well too, that have come up with the leadership in police departments and social services in their communities as homeless outreach team, hot teams, where you have police, community service personnel. They go into these homeless communities, they help people get the services they need for their mental health condition, their medical condition, and they help get people reunited with family. So now, as you drive down your homelessness, you're doing it in a way that is constructive. Putting these people in jail is not going to resolve the issue for you. It's getting people the help that they need. Thank you.
All right, we have a question here, Bill.
All right, thank you. No problem. My name is Joe Sims. I've been a resident here for about 3.5 years. The AJC reported, and it kind of expounds on what Dr. Alexander said about the prison budget being excessive for the state of Georgia. It also reports that in 2011, the fiscal year, politicians are going to be faced with pretty much having to find alternatives to prisoner reform or having to cut deeper into education, raising college tuition and whatnot. So my question to you is, what type of involvement do you plan to have entrepreneurs in the business community in really reaching the bottom line and reducing crime in Atlanta?
And that is it's a huge task, but it's a doable task. Because, I mean, as been mentioned here, we're not going to wrest our way out of this problem. I think what's fundamentally important, and when you start thinking about crime fighting in the 21st century, all of us can arrest people. But what we have to do is come up with preventative measures in which we can help people start out right. Because if we can prevent crime, if we can do things in our community, come up, all of us collectively together, come up with different and new and innovative and creative ways to help deter crime, in our communities will be much safer. Now, how do we do that? First of all, we have to understand causation. And then we have to come up with new intervention. And then we have to come up with prevention methods so that it does not occur. Because we're never going to build enough jails in American society to lock up everyone who commit crimes. Because there are people out there who really want to do better, but they can't for a whole host of reasons. But as a community, I think that the things that we do collectively together to figure out how do we prevent crime, Centers of Hope, for an example, I think is key and is going to be quite successful in this community.
Thank you.
If it goes through.
Thank you.
Bill,
Thank you.
excuse me, Bill. Mr. Nigut, I'm back here. I'm told that we have 2 more questions, one from your gentleman there and then one from this young lady here.
Did you all get a shot at that question, though?
Oh, and of course, you're the most important folks here, so we'll let you finish and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Just on that issue as it relates to partners, that's exactly the way that we're going to have to be successful in fighting this. I tell you, when you look at the number of people that we have arrested, let's just take burglaries. The City of Atlanta Police Department alone have arrested more than 265 people this year alone for burglary. Now, if you look at that and you figure out, well, we've taken a significant number of people off the street for breaking in your home. And then we realize that more than 200 of those folk are now back on the streets. They're letting those folk back out and we are rearresting. Out of those 265 people that we've arrested, they've been arrested for burglary more than 2,000 times. Now that says that, like the doctor talked about, causation. Whatever that is, the fact is, Ms. Johnson wants us to make sure that that man doesn't kick her door in again. We as a police department have an obligation to rearrest that person. We're dealing with a defender reentry, parole reentry, partner with anybody that we can partner with. The DA, for instance, we're doing a burglary task force with the Paul Howard office. Very effective, but as we continue to arrest folk, they're still being recycled back into the community, and they're constantly doing the same thing. We've got to work on that.
Thank you, Chief.
I basically agree with both of them.
Okay.
My name is Lonnie Malcolm. I've served this neighborhood for 22 years as the neighborhood planning unit chair until I had to resign to take care of my wife. My wife was taught in the school system almost 30 years at Douglas High School. So I think I qualify to ask you this question, not you, Major Turner, but Dr. Alexander and Chief White. We have what we call in Atlanta a community-based policing system. You got to know the tenant leaders, the neighborhood association presidents. You got to know the NPU chairs, and you got to know where the hot spots are. Now, first of all, Mayor Reed has done an awesome thing.
Question.
Henderson has said, and Bill and I have had this battle for 30 years, seems like, every time I come to the microphone. But here's my question. What make you, Alexander and White, qualified to come in and fill the void as a reference to understanding, knowing the community people, taking off right away policing? I don't have to know.
Good question.
Because I cheered in your zone when you was out there.
I thought I was the only one who was being tough on.
Well, I think what makes me qualified, number one, I've been doing this for some 30-some odd years in over 4 police departments, and as I've stated hopefully several times throughout the night, the key to our success our success. Notice I did not say that police department's success or your success. The key to our success is that collaborative relationship. I would expect not only me as a chief, but maybe even more importantly, every major and every officer that has any organized group on his or her beat, or to know every entity, to have a profile of exactly what goes on their beat. I mean, technically, when an officer gets into a car, he or she should be able to turn on a computer to see what crime occurs, to see who's organized in that community, who's not organized in that community. We should provide the resources so they can galvanize that community as it relates to that. Those division commanders should have an advisory board from our perspective that should consist of associations and residents that live in that particular area that those commanders are responsible for. And together, they should be coming up with strategies to address the issues that are relevant to those particular communities.
Well, I appreciate your question, sir, and I certainly do hear your sentiments around someone from the outside coming into your community and being able to assess your community and what makes us qualified to do so. Yes, I'm an outsider of your community. If I could have been born in Atlanta, Georgia, I would have chose to have been. But unfortunately, that was not the case. So it makes me an outsider. But let me say something about that. This is an international community. Everybody in this community is from the outside. You have corporate 500 companies here, and you have people who were born and raised in this community. You have people of all kind of gender and race and sexual orientation and religions. That's what makes you an international, world-renowned city. It is not the being the same, but being different and respecting those differences. What I bring to you is 33 years of law enforcement experience, not in Atlanta, not in the state of Georgia, but across this great country. And I hope that my experience that I bring will benefit you moving into the 21st century. And it is important that we understand this, is that crime is here. We all are crime fighters that are sitting up here. We may have different philosophies about how we fight crime. We have people out in the audience who may support one person on the inside more than they do the person on the outside. But isn't that the greatness of it all in being in this community, that we can have that difference? Is that you can hear an outside perspective, which I am trying to give. It's just an outside perspective. So let's embrace the differenceness that we all have. I have a very unique skill set. It is very varied, and it's very valuable, and I hope that I can share that with you to help carry you into the 21st century as it relates to public safety.
All right, thank you, Dr. Alexander. Thank you all. We have time for one last question, brief, please.
My name is Xochitl Rivera, and I'm with Building Locally to Organize for Community Safety, which fought very hard for this forum, so thank you for being here. And I'll be very brief. I was going back to something Bill mentioned earlier. There's been a lot of controversy around the anti-immigrant laws in Arizona, and it's made for a lot of police chiefs around the country actually to come together and oppose laws like 287G and the use of secure communities, saying that it divides wedges and actually undermines public safety by creating a lot of distrust within the Latino and the immigrant community. I'm just wondering if you can share your philosophy about those kinds of programs and immigration enforcement on the local level.
I tell you, it's important that we treat people fairly. That's the basic principle that I preach every day to officers. It doesn't matter what people sexual orientation are, that sex, race, or religious preference. We've got to treat people the way we want to be treated. And that's my opinion about that particular law. We have a great Hispanic liaison in the Atlanta Police Department that's doing great work out there. I look forward to continuing to partner with that community and bringing more and more Hispanic officers on the police department.
I will tell you that I do not believe municipal policing should be doing the work of INS, first of all. From my perspective, it doesn't matter from what walk of life you're from. If you are in this community, we have a responsibility for your safety. And we should not do anything that is going to compromise that responsibility that we have.
In the interest of time, I would concur as well, too, with both my colleagues up here as it relates to that. Thank you.
We are almost completely out of time, but and because we've heard so much from all three of these candidates, and you've been wonderful, all of you, in being so forthcoming and so smart in how you talked about these issues. But if we can take maybe 30 seconds from each of you, why should Mayor Reed name you the next police chief of the city of Atlanta? Let's go in the opposite order that we had opening statements, if you don't mind.
I knew eventually having W would pay off. Having the last name.
After all these years.
After all these years, it finally occurred. A little late in life, but it occurred. First, let me say this. There's been a lot of conversation about being an insider, being an outsider. From a personal perspective, I have family members that live in this area. My wife's mother and father, who are getting up in age, are planning to relocate in Atlanta. 2 of my 3 children are planning to relocate in Atlanta. So from a personal perspective, I have a great interest in this community because I have family members in this community. Professionally, I've been a police chief in my current assignment for 7.5 years, and I've been blessed to work in 3 other police departments. And there have been a lot of successes and a lot of failures. And I think I've learned from those failures. I've learned to minimize failures in the future, and I've learned from those successes. And I have been doing this my entire adult life, which is some short of 40 years. And every place that I have worked, our success has been on the ability to engage the community and have the community partner with driving crime in the opposite direction. And I would love to have the opportunity to continue to build on the good work that's been done in this police department and help take it to the next level.
They prepared me for this very moment, and I think it's my time. Thank you.
I have a passion for this city also, but a passion in a very different kind of way. And the passion for this city being, I've watched this city grow over the last 30 years. And I have grown up with this city from afar. From the beginning to my career to where I am today, this is the only police department that I've ever applied for chief of police. And I've been preparing myself for this. If I look back over the course of my career, over the last 33 years, as you have evolved and come the city that you have become, I've evolved along as well too. And what I did is I exposed myself to being a law enforcement person, to being an administrator, to working in the state as administrator, and now in the federal government. I've worked in every domain of government so that I would be a 360-degree round chief for you. This is 21st century crime fighting we're talking about. We got to think about things different. We got to do things different. And we got to understand causation. And Chief Turner and I will talk about that on the sidebar so that I can explain to him what it is. But this is a very important part of who I have become in watching your community grow to be where it is on the world stage. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that brings tonight's forum to conclusion. We'd like to thank the chiefs and the director for taking part and participating in what is obviously to the citizens of Atlanta a very important event and an occasion for you to hear from them firsthand the issues that they have in their own particular communities about public safety.
You know, and Deidra, I want to just thank everyone here. You know, as I listened to this conversation, I realized something that probably the mayor knew all along. This is not only about you're getting a chance to see who the next chief may be. There's not going to be an American Idol vote. In the long run, it's up to Kasim Reed and his people to decide. But in the larger sense, this is the beginning of a conversation that can help you as citizens of this community and the police department of this city work together in a new, constructive way that has extraordinary promise for all of us as a city.
And so, of course, a thank you to Mayor Reed.
To Mayor Reed.
This is your opportunity to thank him and his staff.
Thank you all.
It's very hard to put this all together. You all have a wonderful evening, and please be safe going home tonight. Have a good night.